Earlier today, the team over at Status interviewed Vitalik Buterin live on their desktop app that you see right beside me. So since it was a live text chat where anyone could ask questions and type, I'm making this video today so you can listen to me speak out the questions that were asked by the team and really that they pulled from the people via Twitter, Status, Google Forms, and the answers that Vitalik gave. And since it was an open chat, the answers by Vitalik, you'll probably notice, aren't exactly in line with the questions that were asked. So you might see the chat go back and forth a little bit in this video, but worry not, I'll make sure that I go ahead and say everything succinctly in a chronological order. But before I do begin, if you do want to see a full blog of the Q&A written, I'll leave the official link to that below when the Status team releases it, so you can just go ahead and double check what I'm saying. But with that being said, let's get right into it. So the person that's going to be asking questions today is going to be Simona, a member of the Status team, I presume. And he or she mentions that they're going to get started with questions that the public have been submitting via the Google form that they had or Twitter, and that once they go through those, they're going to go ahead and open the floor up to any questions that people within the Status chat have. But you'll notice pretty quickly that that's not really going to be the case. Vitalik ends up going back and forth with both the chat and the official questions, and it makes for quite an interesting conversation. So I'll make sure to go ahead and elaborate with that. Question 1. Simona asks, will Ethereum 2.0 replace Ethereum 1.0, or will they work as two separate products? Vitalik responds, ETH 2.0 will replace ETH 1.0. The current ETH 1 chain state, an example, all the balances and smart contract code and storage, will become incorporated as part of the ETH 2.0 system, so applications don't need to do anything to migrate. Question 2. Simona asks, who do you think are the main competitors on the market for Ethereum 2.0? Vitalik responds, depends what you mean by competitors, smiley face. There's certainly a bunch of chains that have marketed themselves, at least privately, to VCs as Ethereum killers at various points in the past. Though, there's a lot of projects that want to work as collaboratively as possible with the Ethereum ecosystem. An example, Near has been positioning itself as an Ethereum scalability solution recently. I'd say Rollups will deliver us from the current state of high gas prices much sooner than ETH2, though ETH2 will certainly provide an even higher boost to scalability. I fully recommend especially non-financial applications to actively look to migrate to an optimistic rollup or zk rollup today. It's a good fit because even though the tech is not well tested, for a non-financial app, even a fatal bug won't lead to loss of funds. It's not just about bundling and executing at once, it's also about moving the execution off-chain. Transaction data is published on-chain, but execution is not done by default. It's only done if someone actually challenges that particular batch. Or, in a zk rollup, the execution is replaced by doing it off-chain and publishing a snark proof that the execution was done correctly. Question 3. Simona asks, speaking of financial apps, people are investing billions of dollars in DeFi. What are your thoughts on this DeFi's rush? Vitalik responds, I'm happy that there's a lot of interest in using Ethereum, though definitely unfortunate that the usage is being concentrated in a few categories and is pricing many of the other categories out. Personally, I hope that the short-term hype dies off and we can see the more long-term sustainable applications emerge. I think the more sustainable applications are often the more boring ones. An example, stablecoins and synthetic assets are really valuable. Grim Blaring Cody asks, is there a reason why all the DeFi apps are not implementing the rollup thingy? Are they afraid? Vitalik responds, making an EVM-capable rollup is hard. See, for example, Kelvin Fichters's thread on the hard work that the Optimism team had to do. And Vitalik links a thread from Kevin's Twitter feed. Rich Recent Hokie asks, do you hold SNT? If no, do you want to buy SNT? Vitalik responds, hold a few, but not a huge amount. Question 4. Simona asks, what are your thoughts on stablechains like xDAI? Could they help? Vitalik responds, I view xDAI as being valuable for the short term, but in the long term, I do favor scalability solutions that fully inherit the Ethereum chain's underlying security, which means channels, plasma, and rollups. xDAI-like sidechain rely only on their validator set for security. Orangered Light Cyan Woodpecker asks, what's the current state of account abstraction? Any chance of it coming anytime soonish? It would obviously have huge implications on zk privacy-based contracts. Vitalik responds, there's an EIP, and links an EIP in GitHub, EIP 2938. That said, it will take some time for account abstraction to get on mainnet. What may very well happen is optimistic rollups will support account abstraction before mainnet does, as they have much more flexibility in how they accept transactions given how sequencers work. In that case, I see AA-dependent applications being tried out inside rollups first. And realistically, privacy-preserving stuff has to be done on L2 at this point. I use Tornado myself, and TX fees on L1 right now are crazy, like $5 to $20 per withdrawal. Hope that someone can make a Tornado-like thing on L2 soon. Question 5. Simona asks, what are your opinions on staking pools for ETH2? Vitalik responds, we've realized that staking pools are inevitable from very early on, and if done well, they can be reasonably decentralized and robust. That said, we do hope that we don't get anything like a staking pool monopoly anytime soon, and that solo staking will continue to be viable. We've tried hard to make the incentives in ETH2 very little guy friendly. Indigo Svelte Zooplankton asks, will Ethereum ever have the privacy by default features to where it is an opt-out option rather than opt-in? Vitalik responds, the Ethereum base layer tends to strive for generality first and foremost. I don't expect it to have base layer privacy because there are too many different privacy solutions with different trade-offs, so it's better to do such things at layer 2. So I don't expect Ethereum, the blockchain, to be privacy by default, but I do hope that at some point wallets make private sends default in more and more cases. I think reducing gas cost of private sends, example via layer 2, is important for this to be viable. Eldorado.eth asks, besides scaling fees, what do you think is the most important bottleneck for getting Ethereum to be used by a billion people? Vitalik responds, one big non-technical one is just ease of use of the fiat to crypto channels. Exchanges are not easy to access in many places. Another one is usability and security. It's just too easy to just accidentally lose $200,000 with the way wallets work now. This is a big reason why I'm such a relentless advocate of smart contract wallets with social recovery and multisig and the like. Quarrelsome Essential Merlin asks, what are the plans of the ETH team after 2.0 release? Vitalik responds, keep improving and iterating on ETH2. We hope that the blockchain will stabilize so the work will look more like maintenance in 2 to 3 years. So maybe some resources will be freed to focus on infrastructure and applications. Question 6. Simona asks, while we're back on ETH2, will zkSnarks be added to ETH 2.0? Vitalik responds, support for zkSnarks has already existed in Ethereum since the 2017 Byzantium hard fork, when we added the elliptical curve precompiles. Applications that use those precompiles have existed for years. An example, Tornado.cash is one example. And now we have a question asked in Mandarin by YFII. In the future, can our Ethereum development team use status as a communication tool? Vitalik responds in Mandarin, of course, you only need the status client to be stable enough. Noxious Waterlogged Hector's Dolphin asked, what do you think about decentralized storage? Swarm, Filecoin, this? Vitalik responds, I don't know yet. These systems are either in beta or have not yet been released. In a year or two, we will see. And by the way, this was in Russian. Question 7. Simona asks, how do you think our projects or products appropriately bridge the way decentralization works with society without crashing with its hegemonic side? Vitalik responds, I think the largest challenges in this regard are the decentralized governance side. As I wrote in articles like the one he links in his own article, it's not so much markets that are plutocratic, it's the interaction between markets and non-market governance systems that often causes problems. Markets for matters of public concern, like governance votes, fail in ways that markets for apples don't. Making governance systems that are robust to collision is challenging, and we're trying different experiments, like an example, the identity-based approaches that Gitcoin quadratic funding is turning to. Our work on MCI and links that work on MCI and GitHub. Someone then asks a question in Korean. Vitalik responds, sorry, I can kind of read the alphabet, but I don't really know what any Korean words mean, except for maybe a few. And then he puts in a few words. Noxious Waterlogged Hector's Dolphin asks, did you not look at SIA? They seem to be out of beta for a long time. Vitalik responds, sorry, didn't look. Zplit.eth asks, How do you think ETH2 scaling could improve or impact P2P exchanges? An example, Status Teller Network or local cryptos. Vitalik responds, P2P exchanges where more of the infrastructure was blockchain-based would be interesting. Theoretically, you can do it without a blockchain, but I can see how pragmatically building some logic on-chain just makes things easier and allows developers to be lazier. Question 8. Simona asks, bringing it back to governance, is quadratic voting for protocol governance bad or problematic? Vitalik responds, I think the main challenge with quadratic voting is that it depends on identity, and getting identity to work in a blockchain context is hard, though projects like BrightRD are trying. Swift Legitimate Ibis asks, what is your take on the launch of the Uni token? Was it necessary? Well structured? I apologize if you may have already addressed this elsewhere. Vitalik responds, I really loved the Uni launch. I particularly loved the egalitarian aspect of everyone's getting 400 Uni, with only a third of the pool going to liquidity providers in proportion to how much they contributed. I know that it was imprecise and there were people who had dozens of accounts, etc., but on the whole it led to a very positive effect. Of course, the challenge is, no one can repeat the same thing again, because people will try to get many accounts with every future dApp that might have a token. Smiley face. Question 9. Simona asks, we've had a few questions about beginners getting started or contributing to the ecosystem. So, how do you think we can address the technical barrier of onboarding more people? Is it going to be primarily through design or rethinking the way we do things? Or will blockchain remain a highly technical segment only for those willing to invest a lot of time and effort into figuring out how it works and to build tools, businesses on and for it? Vitalik responds, as I answered to El Dorado's question above, number 1, easier exchange infrastructure, and number 2, easier security and usability. Reducing fees is in the long run also important. Zplit.eth asks, what are your biggest concerns about crypto law, or the legality of Ethereum for that matter? Vitalik responds, definitely hope that Ethereum applications will continue to be legal. I expect the next couple of years to be important. The EU is making a push for crypto legislation recently, and it's interesting to see some of the principles there. I hope that some reasonable distinction between acceptable versus unacceptable behavior when issuing assets and making applications can be found. Reliable Frozen Sea Slug asks, besides serving as an incentivized testnet for ETH2, would you say that providing finality to ETH1 is the main practical goal of ETH2 Phase 0? Vitalik responds, yeah, I think this is a reasonable way to think about it, though it would require clients to actually agree not to revert finalized blocks. In practice, what I think will happen is if the Ethereum 1 chain reverts longer than a few hours, then the ETH1 chain and the ETH2 chain will point to 2 different blocks, which will trigger errors and require manual resolution, at which point the chain that actually did appear first can be selected via user-activated soft fork as the winning chain. Question 10. Simona asks, besides blockchain, what solutions have you seen that achieved a way towards autonomous systems for societies, communities, collectives, and/or individuals? Vitalik responds, it depends what you mean by solutions. So for example, a lot of the work being done by Radical X Exchange has to do with governance design, but it's operating at a different layer, so it's not really competing with blockchains. There's also a communication solution like Polis that Audrey Tang is a big fan of. Unfortunately, I have not yet researched it enough, though I should really look into it more. Question 11. Sonoma asks, what do you think of Status's performance? Is it feasible to have tens of millions of users? If so, what is the impact on Ethereum? Vitalik responds, my main worry is that for something like Status to scale to a very large number of users, we need to have a robust P2P networks where number 1, messages propagate very quickly, but also, number 2, messages only propagate to nodes that are looking for those messages, so that nodes don't get overwhelmed by having to download everyone's traffic. Existing blockchain networks have number 1. BitTorrent has number 2. Being able to stably have both is still a work in progress. I really hope it succeeds. The other challenge is, of course, on-chain scalability, but fixing that is easier. Status just needs to support rollups. Laughing crying face. Zahari asks, what do you think about the theory that the economy can benefit from the monetary policy of central banks? Do you envision any changes to the way cryptocurrencies are minted if everyone else was using them? Vitalik responds, I think in a crypto world monetary policy would look very different and strange. Particularly, A lot of the arguments for monetary policy raised by Keynesian and other economists assume that money is being used as a unit of account, so contracts, salaries, etc., are denominated in the currency. And if the currency deflated, then the real value of all those commitments get forced upward by default, which leads to unemployment, depressions, etc. But in a crypto economy, we are already used to paying in one currency, BTC, ETH, but denominating prices still in USD. So if crypto really takes off, we may see a full decoupling between the currency used as a medium of exchange and the index used for denomination. I can imagine in a hypothetical crypto maximalist world, central banks just publishing price indices, and that actually still being a half-effective monetary policy tool. I couldn't find a question for this next one, but Vitalik's comment is still interesting. He says, I've always been optimistic about status, but the SNT coin is another issue. The value of SNT requires not only status success, but also an economic model. Is it possible that status can be combined with built-in DEX aggregator, a bit like MetaMask is doing now? Venerated Graceful Trumpeter Swan asks, so where's my double ETH from ETH I sent you last month? JK, what do you think about these crypto scams, and is there a possible solution for this type of issue? Vitalik responds, it's definitely a challenge. I know that MetaMask and other projects and Taylor Monahan's team has been doing a lot of work to catch scams and warn/redirect people when they are about to visit a scam site. But we absolutely could be supporting efforts like that significantly more. Glossy Best Toad asks, as middle management work gets more automated, do you think we will inevitably need a basic income? Will most people just have highly technical or creative jobs as bonus cash? Vitalik responds, very possibly. I definitely think that work is going to look very different soon and people will have trouble with the transition. In addition to UBIs, I hope we can have technical innovation to make low-cost, low-resource lifestyles more viable and more enjoyable for more people. I'm optimistic that with digitization and automation, we can get there. Question 12. Simona asks, with the rise of DAOs, how do you see physical assets being managed when they're brought on-chain? Who would own them and who would have a claim of ownership of assets if the DAO comes to a disagreement? Vitalik responds, this is a good and really important question. It depends entirely on what the DAO's legal structure is. Maybe ask the Lao team what they have in mind, as I know they're trying to solve exactly these kind of changes. Unwritten Medium Blue Barracuda asks, is ETH2 Stage 1 protocol ready for coding? Vitalik responds, it's theoretically basically there, though realistically we are probably going to spend another 1 to 2 months simplifying the Phase 1 spec, as client dev teams are still finishing up Phase 0 work, so we still have the freedom to do this. Question 13. Simona asks, what advice would you give to aspiring Ethereum Core Devs? Vitalik responds, write your own ETH1 or ETH2 implementation and see if you can get it to pass the tests. It's a great way to learn. Simona then asks, have you got any questions for the community? Vitalik responds, personally, I would love to hear more stories from status users, or Ethereum users more generally, from countries or locations that we don't normally think of as being existing crypto hubs. Would love to understand an example what the perspective of more people from Africa or India or Southeast Asia who are exploring these applications is, why they find this tech valuable, and what challenges they're facing, etc. Warlike Attractive Rattail asks, what is the advantage of a wormhole? Vitalik responds, wormholes potentially allow de facto faster than light travel, which seems like it could be really useful in helping humanity colonize interstellar space, or in ensuring cryptocurrency/blockchain networks can keep working well once we do that. zsplit.eth asks, are you worried about dark DAOs? Vitalik responds, definitely somewhat worried, though I think in practice, DAOs that try to have direct real-world effects that lots of people really dislike are going to be attackable in a lot of ways. It's hard for key participants to remain anonymous. Every paragraph you say will be statistically analyzed and used against you. There's ways to attack the oracles, etc., etc. Evan Van Ness asks, what's your favorite NFT? Vitalik says, can I just say ENS names? Laughing crying face. Simona then ends off the session by saying that they're starting a series of interviews around what Vitalik had mentioned earlier, people who are from the Middle East, Africa, India, etc., around the status community and talking to some awesome contributors that are from those areas that are not really known as crypto. So, Simona mentions to ping him or her if you would like to get involved in that or share your story. So I just want to end off saying that I think this was a really cool way to have an interview, to not only show off the platform, but to also unite people of different backgrounds by gathering questions from the community. Vitalik really showed off his multicultural background by answering questions in Chinese, Russian, and even one in German. But shout outs to the Status team as well for having this awesome app. I mean, for bringing Vitalik on. And yeah, man, let me know in the comments below. Do you guys have any questions that you'd want to ask Vitalik? With that being said, thank y'all for watching. Make sure you like and sub if you're on YouTube. Follow me if you're on Library. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.